It started on an ordinary Friday night, one of those rare evenings where I convinced my wife, Lisa, to leave her endless work emails and join me for a night out. Bowling wasn't exactly her thing, it was more my attempt to rekindle the fun we used to have in simpler times. Lisa suggested we invite her best friend, Mia, and Mia's boyfriend, Ryan, to join us. I agreed, thinking it might make the night more lively. Looking back, I wonder if I subconsciously knew something was off. But at the time, I was just excited to see Lisa smile again, the kind of smile that reached her eyes, not the polite one she wore out of obligation. Mia and Ryan arrived just after us. Mia, always the life of the party, teased Lisa about how terrible she was at bowling. Lisa laughed, really laughed, and for a second, I let myself believe we could get back to the way we were. But then there was Ryan. He was confident, the kind of guy who had a joke for every occasion and charm to spare. He helped Lisa with her form, placing his hands over hers as they lined up the ball. I told myself it was harmless. That's just Ryan. Friendly. Easygoing. But there was a moment, a flicker of something between them as she turned her head toward his, where my stomach tightened. A silent alarm, faint but undeniable. By the third frame, the atmosphere had shifted. Ryan was cracking jokes at Mia's expense, and Lisa laughed a little too hard. I tried to brush it off, blaming it on my imagination, but then I saw the way Lisa looked at him when she thought no one was watching. A spark. Brief, but enough to light a slow, simmering fire in the back of my mind. When it was Ryan's turn, Lisa stood close, leaning against the ball return as if drawn to him by some invisible thread. Mia didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, but didn't care. I couldn't tell. I excused myself to get a drink, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. At the bar, I tried to reason with myself. Lisa was my wife, and we'd been through too much for me to start doubting her over a look. Yet, no matter how I framed it, the tension in my chest wouldn't loosen. Something was happening, and I didn't know if I was ready to face it. When I got back from the bar, Lisa was sitting next to Ryan, leaning closer than I would have liked. Mia was across from them, distracted by her phone. I slid into the seat beside Lisa, forcing myself to act casual. "How's it going? Getting the hang of it yet?" I asked her, keeping my voice light. Lisa smiled, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Ryan's been helping me with my aim. I think I might actually beat you this time." "Good luck with that," I joked, but my eyes lingered on Ryan a beat too long. He was grinning, confident as ever, like he was already in on some joke I hadn't been told. The night went on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the outside looking in. Lisa laughed at every quip Ryan made, her laughter a little too loud, a little too quick. They weren't doing anything overt, just enough to set me on edge. I reminded myself it was probably nothing. Lisa wasn't the type. At least, I didn't think she was. By the time we got to the last frame, Ryan offered to walk Lisa through her final turn. He stood behind her, guiding her stance with his hands on her waist. My stomach churned as I watched them, her body relaxing under his touch. I felt like an intruder in my own night out. The ball rolled down the lane and knocked down 8 pins. Lisa turned and gave Ryan a high five, her smile practically glowing. When she caught me looking, her smile faltered. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Yeah," I lied. "Just watching you rack up the points." The truth was, I didn't know what I was watching. Was I overreacting? Seeing something that wasn't there? Or was this the beginning of something that could unravel everything? As we wrapped up the game, Mia suggested we all grab a late dinner at a nearby diner. I was about to agree, but Lisa cut in. "I'm actually pretty tired," she said, glancing at me. Rain check. It was unlike her to turn down time with Mia, and the way she avoided eye contact didn't sit right with me. I told myself to let it go as we all said our goodbyes, but as we walked to the car, I couldn't help but ask. You sure you're okay? Lisa nodded. Yeah, just wiped. You know how it is after a long week. I didn't push further, but as I drove us home, the silence between us felt louder than usual. She stared out the window, her face illuminated by passing streetlights, lost in thought. I wanted to believe it was just a normal night, but deep down, something had shifted. I just didn't know how deep the crack went, or how far it would spread. The weekend came and went in a blur of errands and small talk, but the nagging feeling I couldn't shake from the bowling alley lingered. Lisa seemed distracted. She'd been spending more time on her phone, her screen angled away whenever I walked by. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. Just Mia. She's having a rough time with work, she said casually, setting the phone down on the kitchen counter. But when it buzzed again, she snatched it up a little too quickly, her fingers tapping out a reply before I could ask more. I tried not to overthink it. We were both busy. Life had its way of pulling couples into their own separate orbits sometimes. But still, a sliver of doubt had lodged itself in my mind, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pry it out. By midweek, Lisa suggested another night out. Why don't we go out again this Friday? Maybe another bowling night with Mia and Ryan. Her voice was light, almost eager. I hesitated. The memory of her and Ryan from last time flashed in my mind. Are you sure? I thought you weren't into bowling. She shrugged. I had fun last time. Plus, it's good to get out of the house. Her response seemed harmless enough, but something about her sudden enthusiasm didn't add up. Still, I agreed. Maybe I was reading into things too much. Maybe this was her way of breaking out of a rut. Friday came, and the four of us met at the bowling alley again. From the start, it was obvious Mia wasn't in the best mood. She barely spoke to Ryan, who seemed more focused on Lisa anyway. He was full of compliments, about her form, her throw, even the way she styled her hair that night. Mia rolled her eyes and stared at her phone, leaving me wondering if she noticed what I did. I decided to test the waters. Ryan, you should probably keep your focus on your own game. Lisa's already way ahead, I said, trying to keep my tone light, even as the words came out sharper than I intended. He grinned at me, unbothered. Just trying to help out. She's got a natural talent, you know. Lisa laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear in a way that made my stomach tighten. I turned my attention to Mia. Everything okay? I asked her. She sighed, glancing at Ryan before answering. Fine. Just tired, I guess. But there was something in her expression, a flicker of frustration that made me wonder if she was tired, or if she was starting to notice what I did. When the game ended, Mia excused herself to the restroom. Ryan lingered near the arcade, chatting with Lisa as they waited for her. I stood back, pretending to check my phone while I kept an eye on them. They leaned in closer, their voices low. Lisa's laugh echoed over the clinking of pins, and Ryan reached out to touch her arm. A spike of anger shot through me. I was about to walk over when Mia returned, her face tight. She barely glanced at Lisa or Ryan before announcing she was ready to leave. The night ended abruptly after that. Mia and Ryan left together, tension hanging in the air between them. On the drive home, Lisa was unusually quiet again, her phone lighting up with notifications she didn't bother to check. When we got home, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Lisa, is there something going on with Ryan? I asked, my voice measured but firm. Her head snapped toward me, her eyes wide. What? No. Why would you even ask that? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. It's just, you two seemed close tonight. Closer than usual. She shook her head, a hint of annoyance creeping into her voice. He's Mia's boyfriend, for God's sake. You're being ridiculous. Maybe I was. Or maybe I wasn't. But her reaction didn't feel like reassurance. It felt like deflection. And as she turned away to head upstairs, I was left standing there, the uneasy feeling in my gut stronger than ever. The following week, I couldn't stop replaying the events from that night. Every glance, every laugh, every subtle touch between Lisa and Ryan gnawed at me. I knew I needed answers, but I didn't know how to get them without pushing Lisa further away. The tension between us was palpable, though neither of us acknowledged it. On Wednesday evening, I came home from work to find Lisa getting dressed up. She was wearing a fitted blouse and a pair of heels she hadn't touched in months. Her hair was freshly styled, and the faint scent of her favorite perfume lingered in the air. "Going somewhere?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Mia and I are grabbing drinks," she said without hesitation, slipping earrings into place. "She's had a rough week, and I figured she could use some company." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her as she checked her reflection in the mirror. "You're getting all dressed up for a girls' night?" She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "It's just drinks. Don't make it a thing." I nodded slowly. "Have fun." As she left, I felt a knot tightening in my chest. I told myself to let it go, but something about her demeanor felt off. It wasn't like her to get this dressed up for Mia, and the way she avoided my gaze lingered in my mind long after she walked out the door. By 10:30, she still wasn't home. I sent her a quick text, "How's it going?" The 3 dots popped up, then disappeared. 5 minutes later, a reply came through, "Good. Just catching up. Be home soon." But soon turned into midnight, then almost 1 a.m. when she finally walked through the door. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to scroll through my phone, though my attention snapped to her the moment I heard her keys jingle. "You're late," I said lightly, keeping my tone neutral. She kicked off her heels and dropped her bag by the door. "Lost track of time," she said, her voice airy. Mia was venting about work. "Must have been a long vent," I said, looking at her carefully. Her makeup was slightly smudged, and there was a faint redness on her neck, a detail she didn't seem aware of. She didn't reply, just muttered something about being exhausted before heading upstairs. I didn't follow. Instead, I sat there, staring at the door and wondering how much longer I could pretend this wasn't happening. The next day, I decided to call Mia. We'd always gotten along well enough, and I figured it wouldn't seem too suspicious if I asked about the night before. "Mia, hey," I said when she picked up. "Just wanted to check in. Lisa mentioned you two went out last night. Everything okay?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. "Yeah, everything's fine," Mia said, her tone guarded. "We grabbed a few drinks. Nothing major." I waited, hoping she'd offer more, but she didn't. "That's good. I know she was worried about you having a tough week." Mia let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, it's been something." There was something in her voice that caught my attention, a bitterness I couldn't ignore. I decided to push just a little further. "Well, I'm glad you two got to hang out. Lisa came home pretty late. Must have been a long night." Another pause. "Right. Yeah, it was." Her answers were short, clipped. It felt like she was holding something back. Before I could ask anything else, she spoke up. "Hey, I've got to go. Work stuff. Talk later." "Of course. Take care," I said, hanging up with more questions than I started with. That night, Lisa and I barely spoke. She seemed preoccupied, scrolling through her phone and occasionally typing something before locking the screen. When I caught her smiling at one of the messages, my chest tightened. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Just Mia," she said quickly, slipping her phone into her pocket. "She's filling me in on some drama at work." I forced a smile, but her words felt hollow. The distance between us was growing, and I didn't know how to bridge it, or if I even could. By Friday, the unease had reached a boiling point. Lisa was back to being distant, glued to her phone whenever she thought I wasn't paying attention. Her energy felt different, lighter in a way that didn't include me. I couldn't let it go anymore. I needed to know the truth, and if she wouldn't tell me, I'd find it another way. That evening, while Lisa was in the shower, I saw her phone light up on the nightstand. The screen showed a notification, "Ryan, can't stop thinking about you." My stomach twisted. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the screen, unable to believe what I was seeing. I told myself not to overreact. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew better. I grabbed her phone and swiped up, but of course, it was locked. My hands trembled as I tried to think of what to do. I had never invaded her privacy like this before, but this felt different, necessary. I placed the phone back just as I found it, heart pounding as I backed away. The next day, I tried to act normal. Lisa was her usual distracted self, so I figured it was the perfect time to take things a step further. While she was out running errands, I sat down at my computer and did something I never thought I'd do. I downloaded a monitoring app. It wasn't exactly legal, but it promised access to messages and call logs from her phone. I told myself it was temporary, just until I had clarity. The app took a couple of hours to set up, and by the time Lisa got home, I was already feeling guilty. But guilt wasn't enough to stop me. I knew I couldn't face another sleepless night wondering what was going on. That night, as Lisa slept beside me, I opened the app on my laptop and accessed her recent texts. My heart sank as I scrolled through the thread with Ryan. There were no explicit admissions of an affair, but the tone was unmistakable. They talked about meeting up, about how much fun they had together. One message from Ryan stood out, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait for the next time." I scrolled back further, piecing together their conversations. They joked, they teased, and they flirted, lines that clearly crossed the boundary of friendship. My mind raced as I read each message, anger and disbelief bubbling to the surface. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers, but I held back. I needed more. Confronting her now would only give her a chance to explain it away, to cover her tracks. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to play the long game. On Sunday morning, Lisa announced she was heading to the gym, a place she hadn't mentioned in months. Mia said she'd join me, she added, grabbing her bag and keys. I forced a smile, masking the anger churning beneath the surface. Have fun. The moment she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I didn't have a plan, I just needed to see where she was really going. I kept my distance as she drove, careful not to get too close. She didn't go to the gym. Instead, she parked at a small cafe on the other side of town. I watched from my car as Ryan walked up to meet her. They embraced, lingering just long enough to confirm my worst fears. Then they walked inside, laughing like a couple of carefree teenagers. I stayed in the car, my grip tightening on the steering wheel as I fought the urge to storm in and confront them. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a photo of them through the window. It wasn't much, but it was enough to solidify what I already knew. When Lisa came home that afternoon, she acted like nothing was wrong. She even smiled as she told me how great her gym session was. I nodded, playing along, but every word felt like a dagger. I knew the truth now. The question was, what was I going to do about it? The cafe visit haunted me all night. I replayed the moment they embraced, the easy way they laughed together, over and over in my mind. Lisa had come home and acted like nothing had happened, smiling, chatting, even leaning in for a kiss. I let her, forcing myself to act normal, but I was barely holding it together. By Monday morning, I had made up my mind. If I was going to confront her, I needed more than just a photo of them at the cafe. I needed undeniable proof. Something that couldn't be explained away or turned back on me. That evening, Lisa mentioned that she'd be meeting Mia for dinner on Thursday. She's been feeling down lately, she said, not meeting my eyes as she fiddled with her necklace. Thought it'd be good to get her out of the house. I nodded, hiding the storm building inside me. That's nice of you. By now, I was sure these girls' nights had nothing to do with Mia. But I needed to know exactly where she was going and who she was meeting. So, I made a plan. Thursday evening came, and Lisa left the house in the same heels and fitted blouse she'd worn the week before. I waited until she was out the door before grabbing my keys and following her again, keeping my distance as she drove. This time, she went to a bar on the other side of town, a place I'd never heard her mention before. I parked a block away and watched as Ryan met her outside. They hugged, and he kissed her cheek, his hand lingering on her waist. I clenched my fists, anger surging through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to lose control. They went inside, and I waited 10 minutes before stepping out of my car. I'd brought a small digital recorder with me, just in case, and I slipped it into my jacket pocket as I approached the bar. Inside, I spotted them immediately, sitting at a booth in the corner, their heads close together as they talked. Lisa looked different with him, relaxed, almost carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years. She laughed at something he said, resting her hand on his arm. My chest tightened as I watched, the betrayal cutting deeper than I thought possible. I didn't stay long. I recorded a few minutes of their interaction from a distance and snapped another photo before slipping out unnoticed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start building my case. When Lisa came home that night, she was all smiles, thanking me for understanding her need for time with Mia. I played along, asking about their evening and pretending to listen as she rattled off some story about Mia's work drama. All the while, my anger simmered beneath the surface, kept in check only by my need for more evidence. The next morning, I called in sick to work and met with a private investigator I'd found online. His name was Mark, a no-nonsense type with a weathered face and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. I need proof that my wife is cheating, I told him, sliding the photos and recordings across the table. I think she's seeing this guy. Mark nodded, glancing through the materials. This is a good start, he said. But if you want something airtight, we'll need more. Photos, videos, timestamps. The works. How long will it take? I asked, my voice tight. Depends on how careful they're being, he said with a shrug. But if they're meeting up regularly, it shouldn't take long. I agreed to his terms, knowing that every dollar spent would be worth it if it meant uncovering the truth. Mark assured me he'd start immediately, and I left his office feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. The waiting was the hardest part. Every time Lisa left the house, my mind raced with possibilities. Was she meeting Ryan? What were they doing? How long had this been going on? I kept myself busy, pouring my energy into work and trying to act normal around Lisa, but the strain was wearing me down. A week later, Mark called. I've got what you need, he said. When can you meet? I met Mark at his office the next morning. He greeted me with a grim nod and handed over a folder stuffed with photos, reports, and timestamps. My hands shook slightly as I opened it, bracing myself for what I already knew but wasn't ready to see. The first few photos showed Lisa and Ryan walking arm in arm, their faces lit up with smiles that stung more than any words could. In another, they sat at an outdoor cafe, their heads close together, her hand resting on his. Then there was a series of images that hit me like a punch to the gut, Lisa and Ryan entering a motel. Hours later, they emerged, disheveled and laughing. I flipped through the rest of the file, scanning the dates and times. The pattern was clear. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was an ongoing betrayal, deliberate and calculated. Mark watched me carefully, his expression unreadable. There's more, he said, sliding a USB drive across the desk. Footage from the motel parking lot. I'll warn you, it's not easy to watch. I nodded, swallowing hard as I pocketed the drive. Thanks, I muttered, barely able to meet his eyes. When I got home, I locked myself in the spare room and plugged the USB drive into my laptop. The video was grainy but clear enough. I watched as Lisa and Ryan pulled into the parking lot, his car a familiar sight from the photos. They kissed before heading inside, their ease with each other so casual it made my stomach churn. I couldn't watch anymore. I shut the laptop and leaned back in the chair, the weight of the evidence crushing me. This wasn't just about Lisa and Ryan. It was about the life we built, the trust I'd placed in her, and the future I thought we were working toward. All of it was a lie. For the next few days, I avoided Lisa as much as I could, claiming late nights at work and early mornings at the office. I needed time to think, to figure out my next move. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to throw the evidence in her face and demand an explanation. But another part of me, the colder, more calculating part, wanted something else. Revenge. I thought about Mia, how she'd been quiet and distant at the bowling alley and during our phone call. If she knew, she was hiding it well. Or maybe she didn't know at all. Either way, I realized she might be the key to what came next. On Friday, I called Mia and invited her to lunch. She seemed surprised but agreed, meeting me at a small cafe near her office. When I arrived, she was already seated, stirring a cup of tea with a distracted expression. "Hey," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "No problem," she said, though her tone was wary. "What's up?" I hesitated, then decided to dive in. "Mia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Her brow furrowed. "Okay. Do you know if Lisa and Ryan have been seeing each other behind our backs?" The words felt heavy as I said them, but I kept my gaze steady. Mia froze, her face pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly torn. Finally, she sighed and set her tea down. "I had my suspicions," she admitted quietly. "But I didn't want to believe it. Ryan's been distant lately, and Lisa," she stopped, shaking her head. "I didn't want to think it was true." "It is," I said, sliding the folder of photos across the table. "I have proof." Mia stared at the folder for a long moment before opening it. As she flipped through the photos, her hands trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. "That bastard," she whispered. "And Lisa. How could she do this?" "I don't know," I said, my voice low. "But I'm done letting them get away with it." Mia looked up at me, anger flashing in her eyes. "What are you planning?" I leaned forward, my voice steady. "We're going to make them regret it." Mia stared at me, her expression shifting from anger to curiosity. "What do you have in mind?" she asked, her voice low but steady. I leaned in closer, keeping my voice calm and deliberate. "They've been lying to us, betraying us for who knows how long. I don't want just to call them out, I want them to feel the weight of what they've done. But I need your help." Mia hesitated, biting her lip as she flipped through the photos again. "What are you suggesting? Public humiliation? Revenge?" "Something like that," I said, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not looking to do anything illegal or dangerous. I just want to make sure they can't brush this off or twist the narrative. We hit them where it hurts, their reputations, their comfort. And we do it in a way they won't see coming." She nodded slowly, her expression hardening. "I'm in. What's the plan?" Over the next few days, Mia and I put our heads together, crafting a strategy that was equal parts calculated and poetic. It started with a dinner, something Ryan and Lisa wouldn't suspect. Mia invited Lisa under the guise of needing a girls' night, while I extended an invitation to Ryan, pretending to want to bury the hatchet over the tension between us. "They'll never see it coming," Mia said, her voice sharp with determination. "They won't," I agreed. But this is only part one. The night of the dinner, I made sure the setting was perfect. Mia hosted it at her apartment, a cozy, neutral space where Ryan and Lisa would feel at ease. She had cooked a simple meal, and the wine was already flowing by the time I arrived. When Ryan and Lisa showed up, they acted as if everything was normal. Ryan greeted me with his usual charm, and Lisa gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, as if she hadn't been sneaking around behind my back. I played along, smiling and laughing at their small talk, even as my stomach churned. Mia was brilliant, masking her anger with an easy smile as she chatted with Ryan and Lisa. We bided our time, waiting for the right moment to strike. After dinner, as we sat around the table sipping wine, Mia turned to Lisa with a sly grin. "You know, I found something interesting the other day," she said casually. "A photo album I hadn't looked at in years." Lisa tilted her head, curious. "Oh. What kind of photos?" Mia glanced at me, and I gave her a subtle nod. She reached under the table and pulled out the folder I'd given her, sliding it across to Lisa. "Take a look." Lisa's smile faltered as she opened the folder. The color drained from her face as her eyes scanned the photos. Her hands trembled, and she glanced up at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was struggling to find words. "What is this?" she finally stammered. "Evidence," I said calmly, locking eyes with her. "Of you and Ryan." Ryan's face darkened, and he reached for the folder, but Mia slapped her hand down on it before he could grab it. "Don't even think about it," she snapped. "I've seen enough." Lisa's voice wavered. "It's not what it looks like." "Don't insult us by lying," Mia interrupted, her voice icy. "We know exactly what it is." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his usual confidence replaced with a wary silence. For once, he didn't have a clever retort. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "We're not here to argue or give you a chance to explain. We're here to let you know it's over. You've both made your choices, and now you're going to deal with the consequences." Lisa started to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "Save it. I've already filed for divorce." "And Mia?" "Well, I'll let her tell you what comes next." Mia smirked, turning her glare on Ryan. "You're out, Ryan. Out of my apartment, out of my life. Don't bother trying to talk your way back in. We're done." Ryan opened his mouth as if to protest, but Mia cut him off. "Don't make this worse for yourself. You've lost, so take it and go." As they left, their faces pale and drawn, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. It wasn't the end of the road, I knew there were still battles ahead, but it was a start. When the door closed behind them, Mia and I sat in silence for a moment before she spoke. "What now?" I looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. "Now we move on. And maybe, if we're lucky, we help each other do it." The morning after the dinner, the reality of what had happened hit me like a wave. There was no turning back now. Lisa and I were done, and Ryan was out of Mia's life. But the aftermath was messy, as I expected it would be. Lisa didn't come home that night. I didn't expect her to. When I woke up, I found a single text from her: "We need to talk." I ignored it. That week, I focused on wrapping up loose ends. I met with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers and discussed how to handle the evidence I had gathered. He assured me that the photos, videos, and timestamps would make my case ironclad. Lisa had little chance of fighting it, and with no kids or joint assets, it would be a clean break. Mia, meanwhile, had her own battles to face. Ryan had shown up at her apartment the day after the dinner, pounding on the door and demanding to talk. She called me in a panic, and I drove over to help. By the time I got there, he was gone, but the fear in Mia's eyes told me everything I needed to know. "I don't think he's going to let this go," she said, her voice shaking. "You don't have to deal with him alone," I told her. "Whatever you need, I'm here." The next time I saw Lisa, it was in a coffee shop. She had asked to meet, and against my better judgment, I agreed. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked tired, her face drawn and pale, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "I'm not here to fight," she said as I sat down. "I just want to talk." "Then talk," I said, keeping my tone even. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her cup. "I made a mistake," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know why I did it, but I regret it. I regret all of it." I let her words hang in the air for a moment before responding. "You didn't just make a mistake, Lisa. You made a choice. Over and over again." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know. And I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I don't want to lose you." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You already have." Her tears spilled over, but I felt nothing. Whatever love I'd once had for her had been replaced by something colder, something final. I didn't need her apologies or her regrets. I just wanted to move on. That night, I met up with Mia to talk about what came next. She had changed the locks on her apartment and was working on cutting all ties with Ryan. We shared updates about our situations, leaning on each other in a way that felt oddly natural. As the night went on, our conversation shifted. We talked about everything, our marriages, our lives, our hopes for the future. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. "I don't know what's next," I admitted. "But I know it's not this." Mia smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Maybe it's time to figure that out." As the days turned into weeks, Mia and I grew closer. What had started as a shared sense of betrayal evolved into something deeper, an understanding, a bond. We didn't rush into anything. We had both been burned, and neither of us was eager to jump into another relationship. But there was a comfort in knowing we weren't alone. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to rebuild together. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. Lisa didn't contest it, she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. I signed the papers without hesitation, feeling an odd mixture of relief and sadness as I walked out of the courthouse. 11 years of marriage reduced to a few signatures on a page. It was surreal, but it also felt like a weight had been lifted. Mia, too, had closed her chapter with Ryan. She had thrown out the last of his things and changed her routines to avoid running into him. Her newfound freedom mirrored mine in a way that felt almost poetic. One Friday evening, months after the confrontation, Mia and I found ourselves at the bowling alley where everything had started. It was her idea, a chance to reclaim a space that had once held so much pain and turn it into something else. Something better. As we laced up our shoes, she grinned at me. "Ready to lose?" "Not a chance," I said, laughing. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't forced. We played a few frames, teasing each other about our terrible form and celebrating every strike like it was a championship win. The tension and weight that had hung over us for so long seemed to fade with every laugh, every shared glance. By the time we left, the world felt a little brighter. Our friendship deepened over the weeks that followed. We talked about everything, our pasts, our dreams, our fears. Mia had a dry wit that kept me laughing even on my worst days, and I found myself looking forward to every text, every coffee date, every late-night conversation. Eventually, those conversations turned into something more. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't rushed. It was natural, like we were two puzzle pieces that had finally found their match. One night, as we sat on her couch watching a movie, she reached for my hand. I looked at her, and in that moment, everything else melted away. "I'm scared," she admitted softly, her voice trembling. "Me too," I said, squeezing her hand. "But we'll figure it out. Together." Lisa and Ryan faded into the background of our lives. Every so often, I'd hear about Lisa through mutual friends or see a post from Ryan on social media. But they no longer held any power over me. They were just people I used to know. Mia and I, on the other hand, were building something new. It wasn't always easy. We both had scars that couldn't be ignored, but we faced them head-on, together. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. One evening, as we sat on the porch of my new apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Mia turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever regret how it all happened?" she asked. I shook my head, taking her hand in mine. "No. Because it brought me here. To you." She smiled, leaning her head against my shoulder. "Then maybe it was worth it." And as the last rays of sunlight faded into the night, I realized she was right. Maybe everything we had been through, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss, had led us to exactly where we were meant to be. Together.